CAIR's office in Maryland is providing the CARETAKE podcast as a public platform for discussion, ideas, and information. The views expressed in each episode do not necessarily reflect the views of CAIR or any of its affiliates. References to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CAIR. Thank you for tuning in to the CARETAKE podcast. My name is Yusuf Omer. I am your host, and I'm joined today by CAIR's very own Josepha Mohammed and the director of the CAIR office in Maryland, Zainab Chaudhry. Today we'll be discussing voting challenges, voter registration in Maryland, the Muslim voter turnouts, and voting strategies, and also trending topics about voting today. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy episode 3 of the CARETAKE podcast. How's it going, Zainab and Josepha? How are you guys doing today?
Doing good, alhamdulillah.
Doing well, Yusuf. Thank you for hosting.
Thank you guys for being available today. So let's discuss first voter registration. I know today's
the deadline to register to vote. In Maryland, we do now have same-day voting registration, so voters who do not register today can still register on site. But we want to make a strong push and encourage everybody to get out and to make sure that they're registered to vote, that their information is correct. The address has to match their correct address before they can register at their respective polling places or drop off their ballots. So yeah, we wanted to make a strong push and encourage folks to make sure that they are registered and that they've got all of their information in order.
All right. So I have a question for both of you, if you can just answer. One, why is it important to vote in general? And why is it important for young adults to vote as well?
A great question, Yusuf. I think it's important to vote because at the end of the day, it is your responsibility, the responsibility to vote. You have a right to vote. Who wins the election is going to have a big impact on not just what happens with you, but with your community as well. Presidential elections touch on a broad array of concepts such as economics, education, policy, and I think all these things come together and they really affect your community in such a way that it changes the way your community functions.
That's a great answer.
And just to add to that, I think Josepha made some really good points. And the fact that this is not just about the President of the United States, this is about the decisions that they make. I mean, currently, as we speak, there are Supreme Court nominee hearings going on for a nominee that was made by President Trump, Amy Barrett. And, it's very controversial because the overwhelming majority of Americans felt that this nomination should have waited until after the election so that the people could have, had an input in terms of who the nominee was going to be. This is a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court. This is a Supreme Court justice who's going to be replacing Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who obviously, as we all know, tragically passed away recently. And so this is a very important responsibility that the President of the United States has. And, so many of the decisions that they make. So right now, we currently have a Muslim ban in effect in our country. A lot of people sometimes don't realize this, especially with the pandemic and everything else going on. But we currently have a ban in our country that prohibits Muslims from several Muslim-majority countries from migrating to the United States. And this was a executive order that was signed by the President of the United States after he made a campaign promise to call for a complete and total shutdown of Muslims entering the country. So there's just so much at stake here. And like Josepha said, your vote is your voice, it's your right, it's your responsibility to get out and make your voices be heard.
I just wanted to add to what you said, Zainab, about the Muslim ban. I think one of the main issues in this country is misinformation because when you have Muslims in the United States who want better relations with the people here, it's very hard to do that when there's a ton of misinformation, especially when statistically Muslim Americans have the lowest crime rate as well as the highest educational attainment for women.
Right. So my next question for you guys, it was great answers by both of you. Voting is it's a privilege, it's a right that we have all earned. Some of us not the easy way, but a lot of us have earned this right, and we should exercise that right to its full extent. So going back to voting in Maryland, what is the quickest and most safest way for voters in Maryland to register?
The safest way I would say to register is to register online at the State Board of Elections website. The deadline is today, October 13th. If you register online, I believe you do need ID though as well. So just keep that in mind.
Okay. The next question is mail-in ballots. It's been a topic that's trending. Some people on one side of the aisle are saying, "Oh, mail-in ballots are like fraud, and it's not a safe way to vote, and your vote might not count if you register and vote by mail." And on the other hand, people are trying to be safe and they're trying to vote by mail.
In regard to drop boxes, the drop boxes are safe. They are monitored around the clock, and during the day they do have staff, and they are also collected about twice a day by election officials.
So it is safe to vote by mail for those
Yes.
people who do not want to go to the polling places and stuff like that.
Yes, it is safe.
And one thing to note about the ballot drop boxes is that there's been some reports in some states that there have been unofficial drop boxes that have been established by members of the Republican Party. Excuse me. So on the Maryland State Board of Elections website, and Josefa, if you can share that after I finish saying this piece, on the Maryland State Board of Elections website, the State Board of Elections has listed a list of the official ballot drop box locations. So one thing we're encouraging people to do is when they complete their ballots, when you're going to drop it off, if you're not going to the mailbox or to the post office, if you're dropping it off at a ballot drop box, just make sure that ballot drop box is an official location that's been listed on the State Board of Elections website.
Yeah, if you can just read out that link.
Okay. HTTPS elections.maryland.gov/elections/2020/20_pp_drop %20 locations.pdf.
And what we'll do is on the CAIR social media, we will go ahead and create a graphic with a short link, with a bit.ly link or a tiny URL link,
Right.
So that it's easier for viewers and listeners to be able to go online. I know that's a real difficult link to remember. I know I'm not going to remember that, but thank you for sharing that, though.
Yeah, thank you. We can also have the PDF posted on any of our social media platforms as well, if that's okay.
That's fantastic. And just as a backup fail-safe method, you can Google Maryland State Board of Elections ballot drop-off locations, and if you go to the State Board of Elections website, that information will be front and center. Like, it's very easy to find and navigate the website to locate that.
And also, I just wanted to make a point that the State Board of Elections website is probably one of my favorite websites during this election. You can find just about anything and just about any information, any questions you have. The answer will most likely be on that website.
That's wonderful. So that's if you go to Google and you can Google Maryland Board of Elections, and their website should pop up. It has all the answers for you guys. Deadline is today. It's 5 p.m. for in-person, and it's 11:59 for online registration. Muslim voter turnouts in Maryland are, and what are we doing as an organization to educate and inform Muslims in order to register to vote and actually make it to the polling places or vote by mail?
So, as an organization, we have been doing various events. On behalf of CAIR, I actually hosted this GOTV webinar back in August. So with that, we explained the who, what, when, where, and why of voting in Maryland. We also had many prominent panelists on that webinar as well. And actually, on Saturday, I hosted a webinar on behalf of many other organizations, which also about the state of voting in Maryland, which also highlighted many important aspects that people would need to know about voting in Maryland, such as the deadlines, how to register to vote, and polling locations, and and just how this election year is going to be much different than any other election year because of the coronavirus pandemic.
Right.
And typically this time of year, we would be hosting voter registration drives in like mosques around the state, like we did in the 2016 election. With COVID, a lot of things have changed. So some of the tactics and the strategies we've used in the past have been switched up, and a lot of the information and the content sharing is online now. But CAIR is also encouraging mosques to reach out to their communities and to encourage people to make sure that they're registered to vote, and they're able to make a plan. Like one of the biggest, I think, kind of points to highlight with this election is that because a lot of the uncertainty around the new procedures with voting and requesting the ballots and the extra step now in Maryland, where voters have to fill out the application to get the mail-in ballot, whereas for the primary election, the ballots were directly mailed to the homes. It's an extra step that might include or cause more confusion. And so we're encouraging people to sit down and map out a plan or a strategy of how they're going to actually make sure that their vote is counted. And even though today is a deadline to register to vote in Maryland, Maryland now has same-day voter registration as well. So if you miss today's deadline, you can still register to vote during early voting and on election day. So that's really important because especially if somebody misses today's deadline, we don't want you to think that you can no longer vote. You can still register to vote on site at the polling place during early voting or on election day as well.
And also, Maryland Board of Elections website, they also do have the map of your closest polling places and voting locations. So if you don't know where your polls are, you can definitely go onto the website and find it over there.
And the link that I sent earlier, it should also include a list of vote centers where you can go and place your vote on election day.
And in addition to that, one of the things we're also encouraging our communities to do is, unfortunately, right, voter suppression is a big issue. Unfortunately, especially in certain states, we've already started receiving reports of long lines at the polling places during early voting. And unfortunately, it's a reality. I mean, just this morning, a friend of mine sent me a message in Virginia. Today is the last day, the deadline for voter registration, and they actually don't have same-day registration on election day, and their online voter registration system just went down because of a cable that was cut, allegedly accidentally. And so we're encouraging people to not wait until the last minute to get a head start. The plan will help with that. And if you notice anything unusual, to report it. Report it to the Maryland State Board of Elections, report it to CAIR, because unfortunately voter suppression is a big cause for concern. Not so much in Maryland as in other states, but during this election, because a lot of the different factors that are different, especially with COVID, things are a little bit different. So if you notice anything unusual, if you feel like you were not given the same opportunity as anybody else to exercise your constitutional right to cast your ballot, then we encourage you to contact CAIR. You can email mdoutreach@cair.com. That's M like Mary, D like David, outreach at CAIR.com. You can also call 410-971-6062. And we want to make sure that everybody has that equal opportunity to cast their ballot, and there's no voter suppression tactics happening in Maryland.
And I also just wanted to make a point that voter suppression is legal. It is against the law. So if you see anything like that happening, make sure to report it.
Right. Voter suppression is
Absolutely.
very real. So don't be afraid to report and talk to your officials. CAIR is always here to listen. I know Director Zainab has helped out so many occasions where she's willing to listen and willing to help out the community. It's said in so many articles in the news, this election, the 2020 election, is deemed the most important election of United States history. Due to our economic crisis, due to our health crisis, due to the environment, due to our social injustices, what do both of you have to say about this election, specifically for people who's their first time to vote? It's a whole lot of people who this is their first time voting, whether they didn't vote in the 2016 election whether they just turn to the legal age of voting. What's your advice to them regarding this election? And do you believe that this is the most important election of the United States history?
So my best advice would be to people is to try to gain as much knowledge as you can about this election, about the topics being discussed in this election, because the two candidates that are running in this election, they have drastically different views on how these issues should be dealt with, such as the economy, the coronavirus pandemic, and I really think it's important for people to make an educated decision to vote. And I think it's important for them to be educated about each candidate before they do cast their vote. So they're casting their vote in their best interest.
And Josefa, as you mentioned earlier, voting really does impact communities and minority communities directly. And for these young people to vote who their first time voting, you might not comprehend or understand why it's critical to vote in this election, but it does directly impact these small communities, these minority communities who live in the United States, because all these agendas and all these policies coming in is going to be a drastic change of policies. Like Zainab mentioned earlier, we have the Supreme Court, so many cases and so much drastically different policies are coming to change in 2020. So these policies really do affect minority groups. They affect young adults in the United States more than any other election, I personally believe. So it's really important for everybody to vote, especially these young adults, especially young adults of color, especially immigrants who have the right to vote. It's critical for them to vote because it really does affect their communities and as a nation as a whole as well.
Definitely. And one other point I wanted to make is that this year, I don't think there's any issue that hasn't affected every single person.
Right.
I feel like everything that happened this year, whether it be coronavirus, whether it be police brutality, whether it be unemployment, I feel like everything that happened this year affected every single person differently. And I really think it's important for everyone to weigh the costs and benefits and just to see which candidate would be in their best interest.
That's right. Zainab, do you have anything to add to that?
I think Josefa hit all the important points. It's not an exaggeration to say that this is the most consequential election of our lifetimes. And the decision, the outcome of this election is going to affect generations to come. And future generations are going to be judging us based on the country that they inherit. And there's just so much at stake. A friend of mine and I were talking recently, and she was saying how the future of our democracy is at stake. And that's absolutely right. This is the future of our democracy that's at stake. We've seen over the last 4 years, unprecedented violations of the Constitution, just the blanket kind of decisions that have been coming from the top down in our government. And there's just we just can't afford to sleep on this election. I mean, there's just so much at stake. And I think, Yusuf, you hit the key points as well, with healthcare being a big point, the economy. It's not even just about politics. It's about people's real lives, everyday lives, how they're being impacted by decisions that are made by the President of the United States and his administration, the people who he's appointing into power, who are making decisions that affect us, like our education, everything like that. So, absolutely.
All right. You guys hit some amazing notes today. Very critical. And just to recap everything, it's really important for you guys to register and vote today. As we mentioned earlier, it's the last day for Maryland to vote online, which is 5 p.m. Also, it's important. It's the last day to vote in person, 5 p.m. I'm sorry. And it's still available for you guys to register online until 11:59. As Zainab also mentioned, just because today is the last day to vote does not mean you missed out on your deadline. You can also
just to clarify, last day to register to vote, the deadline to register to vote. Yep.
Right. So just because if you missed the deadline today, you did not lose your right to vote. You still have time. Maryland does qualify you for same-day voter registration. So we're wishing everybody luck today from our respective podcasts. I just want to thank again Josefa Mohammed for joining us today, and also CAIR Director Office in Maryland, Zainab Chandri. Thank you guys so much for being in today.
Thank you so much.
Don't forget to vote, guys.